everybody, it's Dr. Chris from Texas Chiro Health, and I'm back with our 12 Minutes to Health. So thanks for joining us again for the research to find out on how to live a healthy lifestyle. It's a big part of what we do. I was reading something or listening to something today, actually. I get a Minute with Maxwell sent every morning. It's John Maxwell talking about leadership, and he sends an email out every day on a 1-minute talk on one word. And today's word was expert. And what he said was not what I expected to hear. What he said is an expert kind of sounds final, like this person knows everything there is to know already. And he mentioned how he's always skeptical of experts and how he likes to be around people that are growing. And it really hit me that that's what these talks are all about, is for me to grow and understand the research at a deeper level, and for you guys to learn more and more about what the research actually says about being healthy. So, when you look at it, we're constantly talking to you about putting the right stuff into your body and eating better and getting more exercise and managing your stress. And those are kind of our 3 tenets that we've put together to make health and living a healthy lifestyle as simply as possible. And at Texas Chiro Health, that's all we talk about in the clinics. And those of you that are in there, you know that. So it was just kind of interesting how that kind of fit in with what I was doing, and just digging through the research. So let's get into today's research. I want to take a look at stress, right? And specifically, this research was done by Dowd, Simonek, and Alo. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not. But anyways, it looked at socioeconomic status, cortisol, and the allostatic load. So essentially what it was trying to figure out is how does socioeconomic status, which they measured by wealth, the amount of money that you have, but also the amount of education that you have, how does that affect the stress hormones like cortisol? And then furthermore, how does that affect your allostatic load? And when we look at allostatic load, basically it's just the wear and tear on our bodies that lead to us either being healthy or unhealthy, right? How our body handles that stuff. So at the end of the day, we're either moving towards health or away from health with pretty much every decision that we make. And nobody's moving toward health all the time. Sometimes we move away from it, right? We have a donut, or we're stressed out for a period of time and we let it get to us more than it should, or we skip a workout that day. We just didn't get enough movement in our day. Those things increase our allostatic load. So this article in particular wanted to look at that and how socioeconomic status impacts that allostatic load, and what role does cortisol play in that as well. So really good article. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm continually growing in my research and my understanding and my knowledge. And this is actually a talk I've done in the past. And when I went back and looked at the talk, which I do on a regular basis, I go back and look at all of my talks, I listened to it and I realized I misinterpreted the research a little bit. And that's a reason that I wanted to redo it, so that you guys could get another look at it and understand exactly what it was saying. So, again, I wake up in the morning, I watch that video, and I was like, man, thank goodness I'm still doing this so that I can go back and correct that. So in this article, to open the article, the opening line in the article says that socioeconomic status measured by money that a person has and their education level, the lower their socioeconomical status, the higher their morbidity and mortality. And they quoted 3 studies that had shown this. And when this research piece is a review of the literature, right? So looking at a bunch of different literature. So they found 3 studies right off the top that agree with that. One was done in Ann Arbor at the University of Michigan, and 2 were done at universities in New York, finding the same thing. So I thought that was interesting, because this article wants to understand why that happens. Does it have to do with cortisol, which is released when we're stressed? Or does it have to do with our overall allostatic load? And what is causing such a raise in our allostatic load because of a lower socioeconomical status? So it made me take a different look at socioeconomic status and the people that were put into that group, because there's a lot of studies too that say socioeconomic status, we can't really prove that it has an effect on cortisol. Some say it does, some say it doesn't, and that's why they did this study, to really see what the literature said about cortisol. So the first place they went is they dug into the acute stress response. What happens when we, have a very stressful event? And that can be anything from, who's picking the kids up? I'm worried about that. I've got this deadline at work to, my dog passed away, or I lost a loved one in my life. And these are normal events. That's why I always tell patients, don't beat yourself up when you're stressed. You're making it worse. So everybody's going to encounter stress in their life. What is more important is, how do you bounce back from that stress? How do you manage it? And I use the term resilience. And a lot of people use the term resilience when it comes to bouncing back from stress, right? And having the management of that and being prepared for it, doing things for ourselves, like concentrating on our breathing for a couple minutes throughout the day, keeping a gratitude journal, listening to good positive information, or reading good positive information on just how to think at a higher level and how to manage your stress and do that kind of stuff. Getting out into nature is a big one, right? So just getting out there, breathing fresh air, all these things help us build that resilience that people talk about, so that we can bounce back from these acute stresses. Because when we don't, cortisol is released. Even if we do bounce back, right? Our bouncing back is lowering that cortisol. But if we don't bounce back, if we don't develop some sort of resilience, our cortisol stays elevated. And what we found is that is what causes long-term health issues. That's what adds to our allostatic load. That's what moves us further away from health and homeostasis. So it's a big deal that we bounce back from these things, and that elevates cortisol. So what this study wants to know is, does your socioeconomic status long-term elevate cortisol? And like I said, some say yes, some say no. So this study wanted to do its own research and find that out, because if we do have chronically elevated cortisol, like I was talking about, it adds to our allostatic load. And a couple of things that does is it suppresses our immune system. All right, our immune system cannot function at as high of a level because we have so much cortisol present. It lowers our insulin sensitivity, so diabetics, things like that, we become less sensitive to insulin, and so eventually we're not using it correctly at all, and developing type 2 diabetes and things like that. And then also it has a neurological effect on us. It slows down our ability and our capacity for neurological activity, and that's everything that our nervous system's involved in, which is everything that's in our body, because it controls everything, right? So that's a huge deal. If we have these chronically elevated cortisol levels, we're going to have a high allostatic load. But the interesting thing about this study was that they can't really say it's due to socioeconomic status. Some say yes, some say no. Like I said, and there's some in the middle as well. It's kind of all over the place. And like a lot of studies, it says further tests need to be done to find out if this is really related. So I dug into a couple other articles, and I said, well, what would the difference be? Why would it happen in some? Why doesn't it happen in some? And what I found is it's more about how we perceive our socioeconomic status and what that makes us feel like if we have less money or less education and it's a lower socioeconomic status. So I found a study by Cohen et al., and they studied this by measuring blood levels of cortisol. I believe it was either blood or saliva, which is another issue. They measure it so many different ways, it's hard to be accurate. But in this study, they found that it didn't have an effect on the cortisol really throughout the day, but at night there was an increase in cortisol for those people that had a lower socioeconomic status. And then I found another one that said, yes, it's an all-day thing that it raises the cortisol. But the one at night really made me interested, made me think a little deeper. And I could see how that would be an impact, because that's when you're going to think about all the things that having a lower socioeconomic status can bring on. You have more work to get done. A lot of people will work more than one job, or they're worried about, can I provide? Can I pay the bills? Can I get this stuff done? I don't have the education to get a better job. Those stresses will really sink in when it's at night and by yourself, right? And that's why it's so even more important to build that resilience that I talked about, so that it doesn't have to have this impact on us. Imagine, instead of laying there at night and thinking about those types of things, if we could just write 3 things in a journal that we were happy about that day. That's a totally different response in our brain, for our immune system, for our insulin sensitivity, for all of it, and for our allostatic load overall, right? That will lessen the allostatic load, which moves us closer to health. So having those kind of exercises, those mental exercises, reading something to just kind of shut your mind off from the rest of it, reading something positive especially, those types of things, getting out in nature, taking a walk, just not thinking about everything, clearing your mind, right, or just getting away from it all for a little bit, can have a really beneficial effect on our health. Because what we do know about cortisol is when it's chronically elevated, it leads to all kinds of disease, especially cardiovascular diseases. You saw the diabetes stuff with the decreased insulin sensitivity. We see obesity, just overall chronic inflammation and cancers and everything else that's associated with. And what this study found is that the socioeconomic status, while they can't say definitively that causes cortisol to raise, because some people view it as, this is okay. I'm working, I'm doing what I can, I'm providing. It may not be the level that I want, but I'm happy. So it didn't really affect them because they viewed it differently. They had that resilience that I talked about. But what they did find is the lower socioeconomical status it does have an impact on your allostatic load. Okay, now like I mentioned earlier on, allostatic load is impacted by what we eat, how much we exercise, how much stress we have, all of that stuff. So the lower socioeconomical status, this makes sense to me because it can be harder to place importance on good foods and nutrients because of less money. So you think that you have to spend that somewhere else, and that could have a negative impact on your health. It's what's important to you. I know people that don't make as much money as others, but eat healthier because health is important to them. But if you overall, on average, they've found that if you do have less money or a lower education level, that you put your health second and your allostatic load is increased. You stress more, typically. You don't have to, again, but typically you will. You may exercise less because when we think of exercise, we think of going to the gym or having a membership or a trainer. And a lot of us don't realize we can just get out and walk and it's free, and that would have a huge impact on our health. But we don't look at it that way. We look at that being less than exercise, and so it's demoralizing. We don't get out and do it. It just becomes this kind of snowball of unhealthy decisions. And like I said, some people will not eat as healthy as they can because it is cheaper to go to McDonald's than it is to go to the grocery store and buy some salad and some good organic vegetables and make sure you have the right supplements. But at the end of the day, that's increasing our allostatic load, and it's killing us. And it's causing a ton of chronic disease and a ton of inflammation. So I guess the takeaway that I took away from all this is, one, your socioeconomic status does not have to impact your health, okay? What impacts your health is the choices that you make and the importance that you place on your health to make those choices. So the unfortunate part is that a lot of times when we are lower in socioeconomic status, we tend to put our health on the back burner and raise our allostatic load and increase sickness and disease. So, interesting study, maybe doesn't have as much of an effect on the hormone cortisol, but definitely has an effect on our overall allostatic load. So really interesting article. I just wanted to clean it up like I said earlier. So I appreciate you guys, listening to the 12 minutes. And I know that's not a lot of time to get through all this information, and it can be complicated. But that's why on Tuesday nights in our office, we do these talks. So come in, meet the doctors, get into the clinic, see what it's all about. Get your questions answered by the doctors. That's one of the biggest things. But we also do our special offer. If something that I've talked about, like getting your health on track or, putting those things first, or if you have some pain and inflammation, that's what we do in our clinics is we help people take care of this. And I know that, reading this article about socioeconomic status, money can be a barrier to your health. And that's why we do this $39 donation to our local charity. I want to take away all the barriers. I want to get you into the clinic. I want to, do a spinal health assessment, which is the proprietary health software that we use, developed by Innate Choice, that gives you a health score from 1 to 100. And let's see what's going on. Let's see how we can help you, how we can improve your lifestyle, and remove the excuse of money. So just a $39 donation gets you guys that first appointment, and then we'll go over everything. We'll show you any x-rays we take. We'll cover your spinal health assessment, all of it. We just want to see what we can do to help you be healthier and educate you on topics like this so that we can get you healthy. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in each week for the 12 Minutes to Health. Get in there on Tuesday nights, and we'll see you soon in the office. Thanks.